Well, welcome everybody to the Creative Life series. This month we are celebrating women in all of our diversities. So this week I'm here with Gayle, and we're going to talk about your background, your story, your experiences identifying as a woman in your workplace, and just all of the great things you've accomplished.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So just, would you like to open up with just tell us about, what you're doing? What's your story? How'd you get here? How did you land on being an amazing illustrator?
Sure, but I think also I want to say how I got here with you was trying your amazing tablet.
Oh,
can I talk about that?
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's such a great product, and I've been using a tablet forever. I went to art school and I paint and draw and all that kind of stuff, but I started using a computer pretty early on, and Photoshop is a huge tool of mine.
Yeah.
And so I've always used a tablet, and I was just having a lot of really super buggy issues with we can say the name or not if we want to later. You can edit it out. And I was like, but there's nothing else. Until I started researching a couple months ago, and I was like, oh wait, there is something else, and I'm going to try it. And I just love it. It's such a relief to not have bugginess when I'm working.
So amazing to hear.
So I'm really thrilled. And the way that I work is, I started out as a fashion illustrator, and then I branched out into, everything. I do everything from editorial, advertising, portraits, just all kinds of things. And I paint old school and scan it and then finish it in Photoshop. That's and awesome. So my tablet is a huge part of my
workflow.
Work. And Photoshop, I cut things up, I move things around, I sometimes, edit and tweak, and most of the time, the way my art is, the goal is for no one to know what I've done. So it looks like a painting, I've had many times people say they can't believe that it's a digital file, because
that's such a unique use case, because your goal is to not appear digital, which makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's a unique thing to think about in the translation between a traditional medium into the digital world that I think we all have to live in now. Yeah.
Pretty much most artists that I know, when they're sending someone they do a job, it's a digital file, either whether they just scan it and then send it. Not too many people that I know are actually packing up art
mailing
to send in the mail, but some do. Some paint in oils, and they send fine art. But anyway, so my tool for doing this is very important, and I actually still have friends who use a mouse with Photoshop, and I whenever I hear them, I was like, do you realize that you're actually telling me, it's like you were telling me that you're painting, holding a paintbrush in your toes. That's how insane it sounds that you're using a mouse. Yeah. Man, so I think it would be really cool to get in touch with some of those people and give them a tablet and just see,
we're here for
see what they do with it.
The learning curve is pretty minimal, but once you get used to it, it's kind of like, oh wait, I can no longer work without this, because this has taken over the way I navigate, the way I use my, it's a brush, it's a brush or a pen, so it's just so natural. Yeah. Well, thank you for prepping us up. You didn't have to do that,
sure.
But we really appreciate
it.
Love the tablet, and we're just excited to talk with you and connect with you.
Story. Okay.
So who you are, and then your story of kind of how you got here and what you're currently doing.
Okay. So I have always loved to paint and draw, like ever since I was a kid. That's all I ever wanted to do. And when I was in high school, I only wanted to go to art school. I didn't think about anything else. And I went to art school. I graduated from art school. I started freelancing right away. I've never had a real job in my life, you know, so it's
You created your own real job.
I did.
Which is really cool.
I did. And you know, it's there have been many ups and downs, but in the last, I would say in the last, well, actually, I mean, many ups and downs, but the last 10 years, I had my first New Yorker cover 10 years ago, which in my world is kind of like
Making it.
real big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And then I've done 7 altogether in the last 10 years. So it's like a miracle every time it happens. And that's been, you know, a huge thing, and really just I'm so grateful to be in that small little, not that many people that do that.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was a big turning point, kind of. But I also have always just been very self-motivated, and always working on my on my style and growing, and you know, staying current, and trying new things. And I mean, I just got off of a 2-hour live Zoom model session, you know, where it's like a nude model on Zoom with 6 artist friends, and we draw and paint together for 2 hours.
It's so great that you're still like keeping that and keep doing that. Even, I mean, I know I studied fine art a little bit in college, and I know that's like a very traditional path that you know, have to take that course. You have to go through those sessions. But I like that you're like even still being like, no, I can still hone these skills. I still need to take those fundamentals. That's really awesome.
Well, this is since the pandemic. Like, this is only in the last 2 years. Like a lot of models, you know, who were like out of work bartenders and actors and all this kind of stuff. They got very creative, and me and a few of my friends have been doing this a lot, and it's a really wonderful creative outlet, and really fun to do it with friends all over the world. Like, you know, today a couple people, one was in England and one was in New York, and anyway, it's awesome. And another big project that I did in the last few years is painting 100 portraits for Vital Voices, which was a project called Vital Voices: 100 Women Using Their Power to Empower. And
that's amazing.
I tend to do a fair amount of work in women's health, women's empowerment, lifestyle. Like, that's kind of what my niche is.
We love that.
But I had not done, what's that?
I said I love that. We love that.
Oh, good. Me too. But I had done very few portraits actually before I got this. So I painted over 100 women, and now I actually kind of do a fair amount of portraits, you know, like private commissions or for editorial or whatever. So that book it was also an exhibition at the Kennedy Center. It all happened like the same week the pandemic began, so everything was canceled. And the 100 portraits were hung in the Hall of Nations at the Kennedy Center, and I have the honor of being the longest exhibiting artist in the history because the show became like a time capsule.
Yeah,
no
everything
one went
just shut
in
down
for 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
And then it just came down last August. So yeah, so that was very exciting. And you know, I'm always trying to work on things that resonate with what I want to support and what I believe in. And, you know, it's, I feel pretty lucky and grateful, you know, for where I am right now.
Yeah. It sounds like female or women empowerment is a strong theme, as you're saying, in your art and your expression. So how does your perspective, I mean, we were talking a bit earlier about you being freelance and not really having to deal necessarily with like the politics of being an artist in a big studio. So I would be curious and like to hear more about how like your perspective is different and how you bring your perspective through your work to, you know, bring your own voice to the forefront of like female empowerment.
Yeah, so I don't deal with a lot of any workplace politics, you know what I mean? So, and I have to admit, most of the art directors I've worked with over the last few years are women, coincidentally. I've been working with a lot of women in the last few years, and awesome. It's really great. I mean, it's really so yeah. So I don't deal with any of that stuff, and I think the one thing that maybe I'm seeing a little bit more of in the last year, especially, is being a white woman. You know, maybe there's sometimes where a job might go to a woman of color or a trans artist or whatever, you know, it's like to be a little more PC, which is interesting place to be. But I haven't, it's not an issue. And yeah, it's just not, it's not something that comes up that I have
which is great with. Which is great to hear. I think that is a blessing, and I think everybody has, I mean, there are going to be other artists, specifically female identifying artists, that are freelancers that have the same journey or like similar experiences as you have, you know. If your story and your passions really come out in your artwork, I think that you're obviously also facilitating the environment that, you know, my work is about female empowerment, so don't come around me and, you know, be misaligned to my ethos, which I think is
yeah. You know, it's interesting because I'm vegan. I've been vegan for 8 years.
Oh, congrats.
And I was starting to make more vegan posts, you know, on my Instagram, which is pretty much the only thing I do for marketing at all, is Instagram. And someone suggested, you know, you might want to start a separate Instagram just for your vegan stuff, because, you know, you might be putting some people off. And I was like, well, I don't care. Like, they can unfollow.
It's your brand. Yeah, it's your brand.
I don't care. And I don't care if I want to talk about my politics, or if I want to talk about anything. I don't care, you know, like, it's like, I'm not trying to, I have friends who worry about it, you know, actually friends sometimes with very large Instagrams, you know, like they worry about alienated their, but
audiences.
Mine's not so huge that I don't know. It's not something that I worry about. And I've also been really lucky to never be the recipient of like a bunch of, you know, hate stuff. You know, I mean, I know. I mean, I'm friends with New Yorker cover artists who do stuff that's very controversial, and it gets really scary. Like, they get hate mail and they get threatened and they get all this stuff. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I'd be that brave, you know, to do work like that and not care, you know. But my stuff is like, just makes people feel good. You know, so
agreed. It does.
It's lucky
very
in that
it's a
way.
very like happy, like grounded art style, your work.
Well, I realized that it's like I try to capture a feeling, you know what I mean? Like, and a lot of times it's just it's a good feeling, you know? I mean, I definitely have painted things, you know, where it's really sad and hard and all that, but it's not controversial, you know what I mean?
That is a good, clear line, I guess. Controversial versus your own emotional experiences. I mean, soon we'll be getting into a series about your senses and how they affect your creative outputs. And hearing that a lot of your, I mean, you and I'm sure a lot of artists, almost everybody, emotions is a huge dictator of kind of what's happening, unless you're like a production artist. So I'd be curious to see, like, hear what senses of yours affect your output the most. Like, if you can pinpoint, or is it just like all of your creative senses, like your sight, the way that you see things in the world, the way that you like audibly intake? Do you have to, like, what do you do to reset to get like recharged? And are any of your senses really a big contributor to your work?
I need the older I get and the longer I do this, the more quiet time I need and the more space I need to just do my art without having to think about what time I'm making dinner, or if I did the laundry, or meeting someone, or whatever. And I've really, before the pandemic, I really had set my life up where I could go away to do that. Like, I'm going to Bali for 3 weeks and I'm just painting, you know, like that kind of thing.
That's amazing.
And I know, it's pretty
great
incredible.
boundary.
And,
I'd like to instill that boundary in my life now.
and I mean, the great thing is that pretty much anytime I go away, whatever painting I do when I'm away turns into something that I couldn't plan. You know what I mean? So when I'm really just painting for myself, it ends up ultimately being really good for me. But I don't necessarily know how, you know. Like when I was in let's see, it must have been 3 years ago. I was in Bali painting for 3 weeks, and I was staying at this wonderful little Airbnb compound. I had my own little place, but there were other people there. I painted the young girl who lived there. I took a ton of photos. I usually paint from photos. Sometimes I paint from life, but mostly from photos. I took a ton of photos of her, made a whole bunch of paintings of her, and one of them turned into a New Yorker cover, you know. So that was pretty cool. And you know, I was painting a whole bunch of the beautiful flowers and leaves and stuff that I saw, and an art director that I had worked with at a card company saw my post, and he wrote me and he said, "Hey, are you interested in doing a line of tropical inspired cards?" And I said, yes, great.
Ask
So,
me to
you know, I feel like
things? Yes, thank
tropics,
you.
that's my thing. Tropical. Like I would never go someplace cold. I mean, like, you could pay me to do it. Like I would do it if I was paid, but I choose, you know, especially in the winter, because I'm in Massachusetts and it's cold. So I love to go. I don't know, when I get to the warm weather, it's just something happens for me. So yeah, so I find that recharging by having time to myself, to be quiet, and like I said, the older I get, the more of that I need. And you know, if you read about women artists over the years, sometimes they end up alone and you know, they alienate their families, and you know, and I can to be really successful, I can kind of understand how that happens. You know, because but I'm not there, but and I have a granddaughter who's a little over a year old, and I've been painting her since she was born, I have dedicated sketchbooks to her only.
How special is that? That is
so much
amazing.
fun. It's so much fun, and I'm trying very hard to not put ideas onto it, like, oh my God, this could be a children's book, or this could be this or that. I'm just trying to be in the moment with it and just, feel like it's just fun. Because I've never actually, I've used a sketchbook for probably about 10, 12 years. But before that, I always tried to use sketchbook when I was traveling, and it always felt like a have to, like it felt like work. And so I had a breakthrough on one trip where all of a sudden I was just like, okay, I can just make this fun. It's not a have to, it's fun. And that's been a big part of my my work in the last 10 years. And I also started writing about 4 years ago. And so now I do these illustrated stories where
beautiful.
I write and I paint and draw the whole thing together.
Nice. Does that help you, like, conceptually, like you have a more fleshed out story, or like how is that? Have you seen your art grow since you've started writing?
Well, usually the writing is way, way, way harder than the drawings. And oftentimes I'll write and then I'll find art that I have that goes with it. And then I might fill in with some new things. But I have such a huge library of art that, usually if I'm making a story about, I don't know. I had a column in the Washington Post for 8 columns when the pandemic started about how to stay healthy during the pandemic, and it was called "Sketching My Way Through Crisis."
That's really cool.
And each column, it was every 2 weeks. Each one had a theme that related to what people were dealing with, And the first one was like about fear, and one was about community, one was about having a dog,
companionship.
Yeah. One was about music, like it was just like different ways to help us, and it all related to using a sketchbook and how anybody can keep a sketchbook.
Well, that is
don't have to be an artist.
That's crazy. That is literally the definition, in my opinion, of like using your senses to cope and express them in art. I think that's really, really powerful. I didn't know you had that column in the Washington Post. That is awesome, first of all, and then very practical for the first few weeks, especially of COVID and the shutdown, where everyone was very uncertain. It's a great outlet and distraction.
Yeah, it started. So the pandemic started in March. When did I start? I think I started in June, because the Washington Post, I was friends with an art director there. So they started doing a column with an artist in Italy, and they had initially asked him to paint what was happening, and then they realized that he could write. So he was writing and painting, and they had commissioned him to do a few, and they ended up doing a lot. And I saw it and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I wonder if I could do something like that. So I just pitched it and it worked. I mean, it was kind of crazy that it all came together. And what's funny is that when it ended, the editor, I've never worked with an editor like that. I mean, I've had things published, but I've never had the experience of working consecutively like this with an editor who really edited things a lot. Like I would send something and it would come back, all edited. I'm like, oh my God, like she took out like all the most important things. She always made it better. It's like I had to get over that feeling of, oh my God, you've taken my best parts out. And And I had hoped that I'd still be able to pitch her ideas, but I think she was kind of glad to be done with me because I really didn't know what I was doing. I think it was a lot of work for her to work with me, you know, because I felt
You're
like
making
I
her
was
exercise her editing skills
I
hard.
felt like I was in a master class for one, you know, like it was amazing. And it was really fun too, because we'd have Zooms with like the Washington Post marketing team, and you know, because we had kind of high hopes of maybe who knows what this could have turned into. But everybody was very, very, very busy at that time. You know, it was a weird time to be trying to grow something in a weird way. So by the time I finished my 8, I was ready to be done. It was a lot of work. It was really hard, but a great experience, really great experience.
That's what a crazy whirlwind to experience that in the middle of a pandemic. Learning curves.
Well, and also partly because I had been keeping a very, very vulnerable and honest journal that I intended no one to see. And I ended up actually using some of that stuff in these columns. So when the column would come out, especially the first 1 or 2, I was like, oh my God, like everybody's seeing, like I'm really like opening it up
just
here.
airing everything.
And that, you know, but people really responded to it. And it's people usually respond to that, but it's a little scary.
Yeah. To talk about the topic of, you know, where you essentially isolate to get quiet time to recharge and fuel your creativity and let yourself be in that space. How do you be as a, you know, as a woman, how have you felt like balancing being in a family role and also your professional role of an artist? How have you navigated that journey?
Well, very interesting to look at it now from my daughter is the age I was when I had her, and you know, she has a baby, and you know, when I'm with them, I literally get nothing done. Nothing. I don't exercise. I don't paint. I don't do anything except I'm fully on for her, and I need to learn to find a little more balance because you know, that's hard. And I feel like I was always juggling and navigating, and you know, like and as soon as my kids were old enough, I mean, I had my studio at home. I didn't have my studio at home. I had a studio in town when my daughter was born, and then when my son was born, when she was 5.5, I moved my studio home so that I didn't have to go anywhere. And I can't even imagine going somewhere, you know, with 2 kids. So it's and now it's now it's still you know, there might be a time where I was like, oh, I could go away for a week and get my quiet recharge time, or I could go spend time with my granddaughter. Like, this is such a, I want both, you know? Like, so it's always it's always balance. But she's so inspiring to me that, you know, I've kind of found a way to
kind of do both.
Do both. Yeah.
Would you have any, like, not tips and tricks, because everybody's journey is completely different, but for you in reflection of when, you know, figuring out, oh, moving my office back at home was like a lifesaver for me. Would you have any like advice or like things that helped you so much in your journey, and retrospectively you were like, man, that made all of the difference?
Yeah, getting help, you know, like not trying to do it all yourself. And you know, I think it's great for parents to be around a lot is great, but also I think the separation and you know, having the right amount of balance with all that is ideal. But it's hard. It's just
Yeah.
hard. Depends on, and always, I mean, I have a very close knit group of women artists that I meet every week with on Zoom, and we're all, two of us are in similar place, like our kids are
Cool.
grown, and one has a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and one has like, I think like a 8 and 6 or 5-year-old. So we're all in different places. And oh, I listened to the one with kids and I'm just like, oh my God, so hard. It's just hard. It's hard, and you know, you figure it out and you just do the best you can, but it's hard.
It's all anybody can do. Yeah, the aspect of COVID and being, you know, the mother of in the household. I'm curious how, you know, I don't have kids, so can't be in that boat of understanding or even relating. But the isolation and lack of community, it sounds like you have done a really good job just with your friend group of doing, you know, the Zoom paintings or Zoom sessions where you have a communal kind of joining. But it sounds like one of your big things you said, ask for help within COVID, and having a little bit of that help and community limited. I can't imagine, you know, needing that help and being like,
yeah, no one, on your own. Yeah, actually, you know, I have to say, all the quiet time, especially because we live out in the country, so we're very insular.
Oh, nice.
It really agreed with me creatively. And I actually know a number of other artists who had the same experience. You know, it's like life hasn't changed that much. I have way more time in my studio, and that's ultimately
Better,
really good for creativity, you know. So
did you see anything like flourish in you during COVID because of, you know,
just a lot more painting, like a lot more. And a lot more painting women, you know, women. Well, yeah, just in general, just a lot more creativity.
That's amazing. Well, congrats. That's really,
Thank
really
you.
great to hear. I'm glad it didn't fizzle out in your isolation. It grew.
Oh no, you know, one thing that but I don't know what it is, but I never get bored. Like, you'll never hear me say, "Oh my God, I'm so," never. It's like there's always, like, we live in such an amazing place, and I just love what I do, you know. So it's like to have a whole day where there's nothing on my agenda but being in my studio. I'm so happy.
Bliss.
You know, and I've got, you know, my husband is also an artist, and his studio is right next to the house. And you know, we got our dog, and I mean, it was really hard when in the beginning, before, when we were so, you know, when everybody was so, you know, unsure of how to do things. That was, you know, terrible. But now it feels like, you know, a little bit more. I mean, I'm definitely more chill about it. I've actually ate inside 2 restaurants in the last couple of weeks. You know, so
approaching what feels like a little bit like normalcy, which feels
a little
like
bit,
a big old breath of fresh air. Same here. So I guess I only have a few more questions. So I find it really refreshing, you know, you're not in that big workspace, so you're not having to deal with a lot of like the, you know, politics or whatever, passive whatever things between coworkers, or having to deal with even just like any male dominated atmospheres, which I think is awesome because you're just paving your own way. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about your growth, because I think you said you're a very self-motivated freelancer and artist and you love what you do. So I'd be curious, like, what you instill in your own, like, either daily regimen or yearly. How do you approach advancing in your career or advancing in your artwork, just for growth?
I talk about that with my group all the time. We're always talking about what's on our bucket list, and what's inspiring us. And I think that communicating with other artists is really important to me. Like, I really love having a community that I always had an agent, who was my partner. And a number of years ago, that basically wasn't working anymore. And so I split from my last agent. And then I realized actually all I need are artist friends that I can call and say, hey, what would you charge for
Bounce
this?
idea.
Or, what do you think of this, or whatever? And a good lawyer. That's all I need. But I think that it's a matter of staying current. And I mean, for me, it's a matter of staying current. Like, I used to have other artist friends who didn't use social media, and they'd be like, oh, I hate Instagram. Like, I don't want to use, and now I have more friends who we're all very like-minded in how we do put our work out there and all that kind of stuff. And I just feel like building a community with that has diversity, but also like-mindedness. You know what I mean? That we can actually be really honest with each other about that, but also encourage each other and help each other. So it's I feel like that's really important. And I'm very I don't surround myself with people who bring me down. You know what I mean?
That's big.
Like,
yeah.
And I have a great, I don't want mentor, like that kind of keeps me in line. And so I feel like it's like finding the support that helps you flourish and grow is
So it's like
really
it's a lifestyle of growth. You're choosing to surround yourself consistently with community, mentorship, people that will call you on your BS, but then also support you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's great. Yeah, networking and community. It's really inspiring. I mean, I relate to that a lot. The whole COVID shutdown and being isolated, especially, remote working is like, I'm a full remote worker, you're freelance, so you're definitely a remote worker. But the aspect of not having that in-person community was definitely something I personally had to figure out to like stay inspired and stay fresh, because that was a difficult little bump in the road. And on that of like creating a lifestyle of just growth and betterment, what advice would you give to like your younger self as an artist? Or maybe even like if you were to sit down and some young woman in going to art school right now is wanting to freelance or wanting to, like, they look at you and are very honored to have a conversation with you like we are right now, what would be some of your like advice or wisdom bits to sow?
I guess I would say to, like, the whole Malcolm Gladwell thing of 10,000 hours, like, it's no joke. Like, you really have to put in the work. And I feel like we're in a society now where people want things really fast. And I feel like you just have to be patient and really put in the work and get really good at what you do, and also have many skills, like, I mean, I've done so many different things, like between working with animators or designing websites, or, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I didn't used to just paint, you know what I mean, or draw. So I feel like, the more skills that you can have, the more well-rounded, the more appealing that you'll be. And so I feel like putting in the work, the time and the work, and not worrying so much about finding your specific style, or that just takes time. Like it's like none of this stuff, you can't magically rush this stuff, and it's hard to hear that when you're young, because there's the way
I'm never gonna land.
Yeah. I mean, I remember asking one of my teachers, my favorite teachers in art school, so I can't remember exactly how I asked this question, but I said it was something like, how long do you think it takes to make it? And he was like, well, the idea of making it is constantly changing. Like you think you've made it and then you have another goal, so I feel like it's just to be authentic and do something that you love. I think that's the most important thing, because I don't often get asked to do work that makes me miserable. You know what I mean? So like, let's just say nobody would hire me to do a realistic portrait. You know what I mean?
Like, thank goodness.
And no one would hire me to, I don't know, do an oil painting. I don't paint in oils. You know what I mean? Like, and so, but it also, so it's like finding what you love and honing in on that. That would be
That's great. You were saying like, don't narrow, like you don't have to have your thing. You don't have to have your specific voice or style like right away. Did you ever experience like the imposter syndrome?
Oh my God, I still have it all the time. Are you kidding me? It's like a joke. It's amazing how so many people that I know, everybody has it.
Yeah.
And
there was a video.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a really good one.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you a really good one. So when I first started doing portraits for Vital Voices, before I did the book, I did 5 portraits. They do an annual big gala fundraiser at the Kennedy Center, and I did 5 portraits of women they were honoring. One of them was Diane von Furstenberg. The other 4 were women they were honoring, but they weren't famous. It was like 2,000 people, like in the Kennedy Center, Opera House, and the paintings were projected on a screen that was massive, just massive, behind the speakers. So the woman would walk out and her portrait would be portrayed. I couldn't even look. I was like, when they were so big, I saw all the flaws.
Yeah.
Actually had the thought that people must think they're so terrible, and they're wondering, how did Vital Voices hire this terrible artist? Like, I really had that thought. I couldn't look. It was painful to see them so big.
Yeah.
And no.
How'd you deal with that? Like,
I was just like,
you just cover your eyes.
Well, after the show was over, I mean,
blown up on an entire wall. You looked at it small and you're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah. But it's real. And but I also think, staying humble is hugely important. So it's like, there's a balance. And anytime I start to feel like, oh man, I've got this down, it's like I'll get a job that will just put me through the ringer, and it'll be like, paint a beautiful woman. Well, that's like one of the easiest things that I do. I'll be able to do that in 2 seconds, and it'll like, cause me all kinds of problems and put me right back in my, in my place. So yeah.
Have you ever let that feeling, like when you go apply for a job, or like someone has contacted you for a job, how have you gotten over the feeling of being an imposter? How have you gotten over that hump to get to?
Well, interestingly enough, since I don't have an agent anymore, I never hear about jobs that I'm up for that I don't get. You know, it used to happen all the time when I had an agent. They would say, okay, this company is considering you and 4 other people. And then a week later, oh, sorry, you didn't get it. You know, that used to happen all the time. And, you know, it's pretty demoralizing. You know, it's hard to hear about things you don't get. I don't hear that anymore. I don't know what I don't get, you know? So, I don't pitch things very often anymore. I kind of got to a place where I'm like, all right, I think I don't have to be the same scrappy artist I was, you know, when I started. Like I can, you know, but there's a scrappiness of being a freelancer all the time that's really ingrained in you. That's very hard to put aside and let go. So it's always kind of lurking, that little scrappy, like, oh my God, when is my next, who's gonna pay me? You know, like so I don't pitch things very often, but there's a couple times in the last few months actually where, because I've got this bucket list thing that I've always wanted to do, movie titles or like a title, you know, like an intro, animated intro for a TV show or movies or whatever. You know how you see a movie and like the opening credits are just like, oh my God,
the most beautiful,
amazing. And there's a show on I think it's on Apple. I can't remember what it's on. It's called the After Party with Tiffany Haddish. It's so good, and the opening credits are so cool. And I actually looked up, like I couldn't find who did them, and but I did find the showrunner and the director, and I wrote them. And I was just like, oh my God, your show's incredible and the opening credits are amazing. And, you know, I would love to know like what company did that. Well, didn't hear anything back. I won't write again. Like I can't, like I can do it once, but I'm not going to bug someone. So I'm not, you know, every once in a while I'll send something like that, but not very often. Hey, but I submit to the New Yorker all the time and get rejected all the time. So that's
and you've been on the New Yorker a lot.
So that's the one place where I kind of, you know, I have a very tough skin, and I know that it happens to everybody who works there, you know, who does covers. You just get used to rejection, but I don't do that with anybody else.
So the imposter, so like getting over that hump is just kind of like sucking it up and realizing that, you know, this is just a part of the process. And I guess that's makes sense. I mean, failure, you know, failure counts for the majority
is a huge part of growing. You can't have success without, I mean, you can't have one without the other. It's hard.
Completely. Well, it was so nice talking with you.
Nice to talk to
getting
you.
to the top of the hour. But I mean, I feel like I was stalking your work like crazy. I'm a huge fan of, my personal taste in art is anatomical. I love figures in any representation. So whether it's abstract or just a portrait. And I'm a huge fan of watercolor, specifically watercolor with ink integration. But so I was fangirling over your artwork quite a bit. I was like, she's using our tablets.
Thank you.
But thank you again for volunteering and taking time to talk about your work and your women empowerment.